Alright, so I'm going to have the white pieces. And we're going to start with the king's pawn, and he goes for the Sicilian. So, we could go for the classic open Sicilian. We could go for the Smith-Morra Gambit. But I'm thinking the closed Sicilian. It's got a lot of tactical tricks. We could go into the Grand Prix attack after this. That to there. Yeah, I like that. We're going to just go ahead and jump right into the Grand Prix. And it looks like my opponent might be going for some sort of dragon. Although it's a little early to tell. This is an interesting move. This is almost a Nimzowitsch sort of dragon. So he's attacking this pawn, but it's protected by my knight. So for the moment, I'm just going to develop my knight. And I don't want to put this bishop anywhere yet because I'm not sure whether I want it here or here. But with that pawn move, I'm thinking I do want it here. Oh, I'm just going to block that now. Alright, castles. And next we'll probably protect this pawn with the next pawn. So right now, instead of the D and E pawns, our center is actually more the E and F because we're going to be going for a strong kingside attack. Hoping to just bust through. We'll be pushing the queen over to the right to the E1 square. And then we'll probably push the F pawn forwards to bust in. That opens up the C diagonal for the bishop. Alright, we'll move over the queen now. Not completely sure what my opponent's idea is there. But I think I'm going to start moving in with my own pieces. We'll start with a sacrifice. Just for some extra initiative here. And if he takes that, it's actually kind of a dangerous move because it opens up this long diagonal for my light squared bishop. Alright, and he accepts the sacrifice, which is going to spell danger for him. Of course, it is defendable still. It's not too late. Feels very punishable. I'm not immediately seeing it. I think if I go ahead and take with my pawn, I can plop my knight in to that very juicy d5 square pretty soon here. And that'll be takes, and then he takes with his dark squared bishop, or if he didn't do that, he'd be shattering his pawns, exposing his king. So most likely he'd take with his bishop, and then I can go in for the fork with the knight, which means he'll have to move his queen. He might be thinking about tactics. He might be thinking of taking my e-pawn with his knight with a discovered attack on my bishop. I think that would be fine. But if I did want to be safe, I once again could trade my bishop for his knight. My candidate moves are to trade the bishop, the queen to h4, setting up threats. I like queen to h4 because if my opponent takes the pawn, then I have knight to d5, which would be a third attacker on the dark squared bishop. And it would be also attacking the queen, so I'll let that go. See if he tries to take the pawn. If I do put my knight there after the pawn drops, he might try taking my bishop with his to counterattack my queen. But if he does, I can take with my knight. And then he'd have to save his queen. Interesting. Right away, I'm thinking of taking that pawn with my bishop. The two pawns would probably be pretty worthy compensation for the bishop, especially with other attacks looming. I think I'll do that. His king's going to be very exposed. In short order, my knight can swoop in. That opens up this file for my rook. If he tries to move his knight, then I have this. I do wonder what I would do in response to maybe a knight move. Maybe knight to b4 might be interesting. Not sure if it would provide any serious threat. It would be attacking my pawn, but I could just protect it with my rook f to f2, f2, f2. Noise. I've got allergies, so pardon me. Interesting idea right off the bat. Right away, I'm having ideas of sacrificing my light squared bishop for an increased attack on his king. If he takes, then I have queen to f4, which lines up with the rook on the f file, and I'm barging in. I could also just try knight to d5, a counterattack. If he takes my queen, I take his queen, and then I'm forking the rooks. And I'll still be attacking his bishop. I think I like that. And if he tries to save the queen, then I can trade the rook for the bishop, and I can continue my attack over here. So that looks like a nice move. Interesting idea from Dolphin Squad, though. I also could have maybe blocked with the knight or the bishop. Block with bishop, knight takes, threatening checkmate in a few moves. Bishop takes, queen takes. Yeah, that might have worked. I still like the move that I did the most, though. I would say that he blundered here. What did he just take? Oh, the pawn? Yeah. I think I'm definitely winning in this situation. He does have my bishop, I suppose a better move would have actually been to sacrifice the bishop first. Worth a try. Now we can trade these two pieces. Or I could attack his rook again and then go for the bishop. No, because he can just take my pawn. But if he does that, his bishop's unprotected, but he still has my bishop hanging, so it's kind of a desperado situation. I think I'll take, he can take the knight. If he takes the bishop, that would maybe be a better choice, actually. Because if he takes the knight, I can... Well, whichever one he takes, I can save the other one, so I guess it's not a particularly large difference. And then my c-pawn is still hanging. So I will be up an exchange, but I think he'll have two pawns. Yeah, he'll have two pawns to compensate, so it should still be a fairly even game. But with that, he does not get that extra pawn. Which is fantastic. Now I'm looking for trades, simplify the position, and generate my advantage. I was thinking about this move earlier. Protect that pawn with my rook. Looks like he's gonna try for my bishop. I'm not too concerned if we trade bishops, or rather trade pieces either, because trading will be to my advantage since I'm actually ahead in material. Should I protect the bishop and allow a trade? Or maybe should I counterattack the rook with my pawn, g-pawn? I think that I should protect the bishop because whichever rook I choose to protect it with is then going to be put on the e-file, which will shortly be opened up. And that'll be nice. I think I want to protect it with this rook, because that also opens up the diagonal if I want to back the bishop up right there. Oh, and also my other rook is protecting that pawn still. Maybe I'll consolidate a pawn chain over there in the next few moves. Another candidate move would be to kick his knight with my rook on a1. I don't think that would work out very well, actually. An interesting try. I think that is going to mean that I have to lose a pawn here. I have to protect the bishop, of course. That's kind of irritating. A good move. Okay. I'll go for a counterattack. His best move is to take my bishop with his knight, which means I can take the pawn. But I could also put my rook on d3, attack his knight, it's pinned. That bishop move was an unpleasant surprise, but it looks like it is okay, despite that. True. He might check me. but I don't think that would matter. I've got king to f2. He doesn't bother. Looks like he's protecting against a check of my own. I think I like rook to b3, protecting this pawn and attacking his pawn. He doesn't have any great defense, although I guess actually he could just push the pawn up to b5, and I wouldn't have any particularly fantastic response. Although it just occurred to me that his d-pawn is just takeable right now. So I'll just take that. And that means I am still threatening that check. Not that it would be a huge deal if I did manage the check. Probably more pressing is rook over, yeah, okay. So just like I was thinking about earlier, he's going for the b-pawn. I think I'll go for his b-pawn. How do you like it? Ooh, that was worrying for like a second, but man, for just a second I was like, oh crap. But that knight was protecting against my my check, so both my rooks are saved. Now I'm definitely winning. A lot of options. I could take his f-pawn. I could use my rook on the e-file to attack his knight or his bishop. He doesn't really have anything. This might be a good time to resign. He's protecting the pawn, but this means that I can attack both of his pieces. He can save them if he brings his knight over to the f file. Either move will save both pieces. Seems like a good time to activate my knight again. I didn't want to put it on the b6 square because it would be blocking the rook from protecting my b-pawn. He just hung his bishop. I don't see any reason. This was probably just a blunder. If he attacks the rook, I can just go over and take the c-pawn. Oh. Yeah, okay. Wow. Ooh, that stings my soul. An unexpected turn of events. Alright, let's take a look real quick. I should have... Wow, the computer says 0. What should I have done here? That was very tricky. I didn't see that, obviously. Alright, that prevents the mate. I'm still up in material. He really runs out of ideas. Oh well,